This module covers navigating QuickBooks Online and learning about sales and revenue and purchasing transaction workflows. Topic 1 is navigating QuickBooks Online. Topic 3, we'll go through sales and revenue transactions, and in Topic 4 we'll talk about expense and purchase transactions. Topic 5 covers additional transactions that we haven't covered yet. One more thing I want to say before we start this training. We are training on QuickBooks Online, the cloud-based solution. But QuickBooks Online is a mouthful to say over and over again. So for the sake of ease, I'll be referring to QuickBooks Online as just QuickBooks a lot of times. And if I refer to the desktop version, I'll be sure and say QuickBooks Desktop. So once again, if I say the word QuickBooks, I'm referring to QuickBooks Online. I'll use these terms interchangeably. Now, let's get started. In Topic 1, we are going to talk about navigating around QuickBooks Online. It's important to understand the interface and also to know the options of entering information so you can figure out the correct workflow for your clients. To that end, we will navigate some of those common workflows. Our learning objectives for Topic 1 are to discuss the best practices when using QuickBooks Online, as well as understand the QuickBooks Online interface. We then need to learn how to navigate the common workflows. Before we actually look at QuickBooks Online, I want to start with some of the best practices to employ when using it. Having a cloud-based program gives us opportunity for efficient use that we might not get in a desktop program. Your first decision is which browser to use when working with QuickBooks. Chrome is the recommended browser. QuickBooks will perform better and faster using this browser. Also, Chrome makes it very easy to set up separate Chrome users under your main login. I like to set up a separate Chrome user because I can have different bookmarks and folders just for QuickBooks Online. I'll show you that in a minute. Also, sometimes you need to clear your cache and cookies. When I didn't have a separate Chrome user, I lost valuable browsing history and cookies that helped me on sites not related to QuickBooks. Now, using a separate Chrome user, I can comfortably clear cache and cookies and know that it doesn't affect my main Chrome user. You can also take advantage of multiple windows, which we'll talk about more next. I often get asked the question, is there a way to open multiple clients at the same time? Perhaps they're related companies, and you need to compare the do-tos with the do-froms. Although QuickBooks Online only allows you to have one company open at a time, that restriction is within one browser. So the workaround is to use multiple browsers or multiple Chrome users. Log into qbo.intuit.com on a separate browser and you can open a different company file. Let's switch into Chrome and get a visual on what I'm talking about. I just said that I can have different bookmarks when using a distinct Chrome user. You might ask, what is the value in that? My bookmarks all have to do with QuickBooks. Kind of makes it an icon bar. Let's look. There are common transactions I enter and common reports that I use. The beauty of this is that no matter what client I have open, I have the same bookmark bar. If I have a client that has different screens that I need to open, I create a folder for that client on the bookmark bar and create bookmarks specifically for them, and again, have easy access to what I need to do or see. One of the advantages to working in the cloud, whether you're in an accounting program or not, is that you can have multiple tabs open across the top of your screen. This really comes in handy if you have multiple monitors. In live classes, I ask how many people have dual monitors, and most of us have at least 2. I've heard that productivity goes down when you have more than 4. What does that mean for us in QuickBooks? I can easily duplicate a QuickBooks tab. Click on the tab, right-click, and choose Duplicate, and then pull that tab to your second screen. This allows me maybe to have a report up on one screen and transactions or bank recs or lists open on the other screen. All I have to do to update the report is refresh the report screen. How about keyboard shortcuts? I'm so used to working with keyboard shortcuts in any desktop product, I wondered if I would have to switch to always using my mouse when working in the cloud. Not true. Some common keyboard shortcuts can be found by clicking Control plus Alt plus the slash key. If you're on a Mac, use Option plus Control plus the slash key. Notice that the same shortcut key acts differently depending on what screen you are on. For example, Control plus Alt plus C opens up the Customer Center as long as you're not on a transaction. If you're on a transaction, it cancels the transaction. If you're using a Mac, substitute Command plus Alt plus the letter. My favorite shortcuts are the date shortcuts. When you are in a date field, you can move forward and back a day at a time by using your plus and your minus keys. To go to today, use the letter T. Here are some other date shortcuts. W for the first day of the week. K for the last day of the week. M for the first day of the month. H for the last day of the month. Y for the first day of the year. And R for the last day of the year. Are you seeing a pattern? As long as you can spell those words, use the first letter to go to the beginning and the last letter of the word to go to the end. Oh, and the escape key will cancel the transaction you're on. There's also a simple calculator available directly on the rate or amount fields of a transaction. Enter your first number, and then use your keyboard to add with the plus key, subtract with the minus key, multiply with the asterisk, or divide with the slash key. Then hit Tab. The beauty of this feature is the results are entered directly into the transaction, no retyping of numbers. Now let's actually get into QuickBooks Online and get familiar with the interface. On the left-hand side of your screen is what you call the navigation bar. When your client opens their QuickBooks company, it opens up to the client home dashboard. This gives your client a snapshot of how their company is doing, as well as lists that need to be completed and activities that need attention. As you will see, as you go down the navigation bar, the next three options are your customer, vendor, and employee centers. As I said before, the client home is the first screen that comes up when the QuickBooks Online file is opened. The top of the screen shows the name of the company you are working on, which is very helpful for us. Notice that there is an income bar. It shows you open invoices, which of them are overdue, as well as what was paid in the last 30 days. There's also an expense graph giving you a breakdown of types of expenses. As you scroll down, QuickBooks combines the income and expenses and lets you see a chart related to your profit and loss. As you hover over any of the sections of these graphics, you will get more information about that section, and you can actually drill down to get either a detailed report related to the totals or to an actual transaction. On the right-hand side of the page, there is a listing of bank and credit card balances. And if those accounts are connected with the banks, you get information as to bank balance versus QuickBooks Online balance, and how many transactions have been downloaded and have not yet been matched or entered into QuickBooks. It acts as a reminder to review the bank feeds on a timely basis. You'll learn more about bank feeds and the Banking Center later in this training. On the lower right is a listing of activities that need your attention, such as tax payments that are overdue or due at all. You can also see a listing of transactions that have been added, listed by date. This area can be filtered by a particular transaction type, which is helpful, for example, if a customer calls and you easily want to find an invoice that you recently created. The last button I want to show you on this screen is the Private Mode button at the top of the page. When you turn Private Mode on, QuickBooks basically hides all the financial numbers on the screen to protect the sensitive information from anyone walking by your computer. This is really helpful if you're working in QuickBooks Online and you're in a public place, such as an airport or a coffee shop. Finally, on the left-hand side of the page is the navigation bar. You'll learn a lot more about the navigation bar as we go through this training. Because the client homepage automatically opens when you open up QuickBooks Online, it almost forces the small business to review key metrics about their business, as well as alerts them to important upcoming tasks. This is a good thing. Too often, small businesses enter transactions but don't really look at their results until tax time. Let's move on to our next section. On the navigation bar, we're going to look at customers. The Customer tab opens the Customer Center. The Money bar is a visual representation of unbilled estimates and time and expenses, receivables, including overdue invoices, as well as invoices paid in the last 30 days. You can drill down on any element of the Money bar to get to lists and ultimately transactions for reviewing, editing, or deleting. Clicking on the New Customer button does just that. It creates a new customer right in the Customer Center, as opposed to creating one on the fly in the customer field of a transaction, which you can always do. You can also click on the drop-down next to the New Customer and choose to import customers here. The columns of the Customer Center can be edited by selecting the Settings gear icon to show the address and/or the email, as well as how many rows of the center to show on a page and whether or not to include inactive customers. This setting is sticky, meaning the next time you open the Customer Center, QuickBooks will remember your preference. Click on the customer name to view or edit the profile information, see a listing of transactions, or create new transactions. Clicking on the envelope icon next to a customer name in the Customer Center launches your native email client to send them an email. Elsewhere in the Customer Center, you can easily find a customer by typing in the name in the search box. You can sort forwards and backwards by several parameters. Under the Actions column, you can create invoice or invoice payments, or send a reminder or print a statement for an individual customer. Or you can perform batch actions related to statements and email for more than one customer. Clicking on a hyperlink for pending invoices takes you to those invoices. Let's move to our next tab, which is the Vendors tab. Clicking on the Vendors tab opens the Vendor Center. It's very similar to the Customer Center, except it's related to vendors, not customers. The Money bar relates to potential expenses, open purchase orders, unpaid and overdue bills, and what has been paid in the last 30 days. You can drill down on any of these sections. Although you can always create a new vendor on the fly in transactions by simply typing a new vendor name in the vendor field, the New Vendor button in the Vendor Center also allows you to create a new vendor. And if you click on the drop-down menu next to New Vendor, you can import vendors here. The Prepare 1099s button allows you to, you guessed it, prepare 1099s. Note that 1099s are available only in QuickBooks Online Plus, and accounts payable are only available in QuickBooks Online Essentials and Plus. Otherwise, the editing columns, individual transactions, batch transactions, emailing, and viewing the vendor work the same as what we just saw in the Customer Center. Let's briefly look at the other tabs on the left-hand navigation bar. As you may have guessed, the Employees tab opens up the Employee Center. Here is where you add your employees and turn on QuickBooks Online Payroll. That's an integrated do-it-yourself payroll solution that you can add to your subscription for an additional fee. We'll spend a lot of time in the Transactions tab later, so I'm going to skip that right now. If you have sales tax or payroll turned on, a tax tab will appear that opens up centers related to those types of taxes. I want to answer the question, where do I enter transactions? We've seen in the prior demos that we can enter one in the customer, vendor, or employee centers, but there are two other main areas for entering transactions and developing a workflow. They are the Transactions tab on the navigation bar and the Quick Create icon at the top of the screen. Different ways to enter transactions here: banking, sales, and expenses. And registers is where you access your balance sheet account registers. Banking opens up the banking center. If you have connected your bank and/or credit card accounts to QuickBooks, you'll see those accounts listed at the top of the page. And then a listing of transactions that need to be either matched or added to QuickBooks. We'll actually do that in topic 4 of this training. Sales. This opens the Sales Center, where we have a sales money bar that shows potential revenue, unpaid or overdue invoices, and what has been paid in the last 30 days. As opposed to the Customer Center, which shows a customer list, the Sales Center shows a listing of transactions that can be easily filtered. New transactions can be easily added from the top of the screen. The Actions column shows suggested next steps as well as other choices related to those transactions. As in the other centers, you can check multiple transactions and perform batch actions of printing or sending. Let's move on to the Expenses tab. Here is a listing of recent expense transactions, which, like other centers, can be easily filtered. Click on the transaction to get back to the original transaction. The types of transactions that can be entered from here are bills, expenses, checks, or purchase orders. You can also print checks from this screen. Lastly, let's take a quick look at the Registers tab. Here you see a listing of your balance sheet type of accounts, except retained earnings. If you click on the account to highlight it, you can edit the account, delete the account, which really makes it inactive, or go to the register. To summarize, the navigation bar in general and the Transactions tab specifically are places to go to enter transactions. Another place to easily enter transactions is by using the Quick Create icon. Let's look at that next. The Quick Create icon is at the top of the page. It's the plus key that spins to an X when you click on it. This is your one-stop shop for creating new transactions. There are two views of the Quick Create. There's a condensed view that just shows the common transactions of invoice, estimate, expense, and check. Click on Show More, and that opens a view that lists all transactions in QuickBooks sorted by the different areas of the company: customers, vendors, employees, and other. In this topic, we'll first go over company settings and review the preferences related to sales transactions. Then we'll start entering transactions using the Customer Center, Sales Transactions, and Quick Create. Finally, I'll show you how to set up recurring transactions. Before we actually start, I want to review the types of sales-related transactions. An estimate. It's a non-posting transaction that allows us to provide our customers with information on what we think we are going to charge them. Think of it as a quote or a proposal. You create an invoice to charge your customers that you want to allow to pay on account. An invoice will increase accounts receivable and increase income. A payment is received against an invoice and decreases accounts receivable and increases either a bank account or undeposited funds. A sales receipt is used when you receive payment at the time of sale. It increases income and increases either a bank account or undeposited funds. Credit memos are used when a customer returns something or negotiates a lower price. This creates a credit in AR that can be used against future invoices. Refund receipts are also used when a customer returns something, but with a refund receipt, you're refunding their payment. Delayed charges and credits are available in Essentials and Plus only and are non-posting transactions that reflect potential revenue increase or decrease, and then they can be used on future transactions. Did you get all that? Let's move on to sales-related company settings. When you open up the company settings page, there are tabs for different kinds of settings. Sales has its own category, and we'll look at them, but also we'll look at a sales-related setting under the advanced settings. Let's take a look now. Open up the company settings by going to the gear icon at the upper right-hand side of the page. You've already seen this a few times. Not surprising, the company settings are listed under the settings category. Let's go right to the sales settings. Our first setting allows us to customize our forms. This customization applies to invoices, estimates, and sales receipts. You can choose your style, including uploading a logo. You can also change your header. Then you can identify which columns you want to see and put them in whatever order you want. You can customize your footer. And on the More tab, you've got choices. Make sure to take a look at billable time and expenses if you invoice based on time and expense. When you invoice for time, you can include the employee name on the form, as well as group by activities, by time period, or type, and have the group subtotaled. What I really like is you can show the account summary at the top of the form. This gives you the balance forward, the new charges on this invoice, and the total amount due. Sales form content has you set options such as preferred invoice terms, whether to add a shipping, discount, or deposit field. This is where you can also add 3 custom fields. Products and services. Do you want to see that column on the sales form? If so, make sure to turn it on. It's in this area that you turn on if you want to track inventory. Inventory is only in QuickBooks Online Plus. Make sure to take a look at the online delivery, which are your email options for sales forms. Do you want the sales form to attach as a PDF? Do you want sales form summary or details to show in the email? Then there are email options for invoices, including using online invoice. The other choices are HTML or plain text emails. The last settings we need to look at before we start entering transactions are under the advanced settings. They are listed in the automation area. Pre-fill forms is asking you if you want QuickBooks to copy over the same information from the last transactions using the same customer. Beware of automatically applying credits. It means that the credit will automatically be applied to the next invoice. Know your client. I've seen small businesses get into trouble with this automation. That's it for the sales company settings. Let's finally start entering transactions. You've already seen the Customer Center, so we're going to just start right in. Cool Cars has called me and wants me to send them an estimate on doing some design work for them. Under the Action column, select Estimate. And fill it in. I estimate it's going to take me 75 hours for this project. At the bottom of the screen, I can just save and stay. That's really useful for long estimates. I can save and send, or I can save and close. I'm going to save and stay because I want to show you that when you review an already recorded transaction, other options show up on the bottom of the screen. Now I have a More button. If I click on More, I can copy this estimate, delete it, or look at the audit history. Let's close out of here by using our Escape key. Back in the Customer Center, my money bar now shows estimated revenue. If I click on that part of the money bar, QuickBooks filters the list for just those with estimates. From here, I can create an invoice from the estimate. Note, make sure that in the company settings, the Copy Estimate to Invoice is turned on. Click on Start Invoice. I have my drawer on the right-hand side that shows my estimate. I can click on Add to add that estimate to my invoice. Then I can add or adjust any lines and save and send or save and close. Now, if I don't want to invoice for all 75 hours here, I can change the quantity, but the estimate is still considered fully invoiced. There is no progress billing in QuickBooks. Back in the Customer Center, on the money bar, there's unbilled activity. Let's see what it is and create an invoice. Video Games by Dan has 2 unbilled activities. I can see a list of transactions by clicking on the unbilled activities. If I start the invoice from this screen, both unbilled activities will show up on the invoice. If I look at the 2 unbilled activities, I can invoice for each individual line item. Instead of doing that from here, let's move over to the Transactions tab on the navigation bar and create the invoice from there. Before we do that, let's summarize what you can do in the Customer Center related to transactions. You can create transactions from the action column related to a customer. You can click on a customer name to open up the customer page, and from that screen can create any new sales transaction, or you can create a transaction from the action column for certain transactions. We're ready to move over to the Transactions part of the navigation bar. Under Transactions, click on Sales. This opens the Sales Transactions or Sales Center. Under the Actions column are suggested next steps. The money bar goes across the top, and I can filter the money bar here the same way I can in the Customer Center. Notice that I can also create new transactions at the top right hand of the screen. Let's create a new invoice for Video Games by Dan. When I enter the customer name, QuickBooks opens up a drawer on the right side that shows me time or expense activities that have been marked billable. I can easily add them to the invoice. The difference between creating the invoice from here and creating it from the action column for that customer or activity is that here I have a choice of what I'm adding, where if I create an invoice from the action column, it automatically puts the unbilled activity on the invoice. Let's just invoice for the installation and save and close. Now we're back in the sales transaction list. Clear the filter so that we can see all the transactions. Note that this table is sorted by date, but I can sort by any column header. The next step is to receive payment. Dan sent us a check for $300. Click on Receive Payment next to his name. A listing of outstanding transactions shows up with the invoice checked. I can deposit to undeposited funds or directly into a bank account. If I'm signed up for QuickBooks Payments, I could actually process a credit card here. You'll learn more about payments in Module 5. Let's save and close. That's how easy it is. From the Sales Transactions page, I can enter transactions based on currently listed transactions, or I can create new sales transactions from the drop-down at the top of the page. Our next sales transaction, we're going to enter from the Quick Create icon. If I have the expanded view of Quick Create open up, I see a listing of sales type transactions under the Customers column. We talked a little bit about delayed charges before, but you might not understand what that means. Let's click on it. A delayed charge is a non-posting transaction, and what I'm telling QuickBooks is that I need to invoice a customer for something, but I don't want to invoice for it now. Let's say you pave driveways. You send your crew out, and they come back at the end of the night with a list of driveways that they paved that day. You only invoice once a month, but you want to remember to invoice everyone whose driveway you paved. Enter a delayed charge in QuickBooks so that at the end of the month, you can just add that paving to the invoice. When we looked at the advanced company settings, there was a setting to automatically invoice unbilled activity. If you're confident enough that the information will be entered correctly, you might want to turn that preference on. Know your client. Let's enter a delayed charge for Amy's Bird Sanctuary for gardening. $4 hours at $35 an hour. And save. This transaction will add to the unbilled activity in the money bar of the Sales Transactions page, as well as the Customer Center. I can filter for unbilled activity. Here it is. From Quick Create, create an invoice. As soon as I enter Amy's Bird Sanctuary, my drawer opens up to show me that there's not only the charge that I just entered, but also some billable time. I'm going to add all of that and save and close. See how easy this is? Let's move on. We just talked about delayed charges that helps with invoicing, and now we have another tool to make us efficient. The scenario here is you might have monthly recurring charges, such as rent, or monthly membership, or quarterly pledges. QuickBooks has a feature called Recurring Transactions. Most transactions can be made recurring. If you have an already recorded transaction and want to use this transaction to create a recurring transaction template, just open it up. We've been contracted by Bill's Windsurf Shop for weekly gardening and pest control. I already have an invoice that I've created with those items on it. I'm going to open it up. Click on Make Recurring at the bottom of the screen. There's a lot of flexibility here in making transactions recurring, but you get the picture. Notice that you can automatically send out emails. To see a list of recurring transactions, go to the gear icon and open the Recurring Transactions under Lists. I can also add new templates here. Click on New and see a listing of all transaction types you can make recurring. We are done with our sales and revenue topic. Nice job. Welcome to Topic 4, Expenses and Purchases. In this topic, we'll look at expense settings, and then start entering expense type transactions using the Vendor Center, the Expenses tab, and Quick Create. Finally, you'll get an introductory lesson to the Banking Center. The types of expense or purchase transactions which relate to monies going out are listed here. Bills, expenses, checks, bill payments, purchase orders, vendor credits, and credit card credits. Some of them are non-posting, such as purchase order, because purchase order may or may not lead to a bill. Some of these, such as expense and write check, are available on all subscription levels of QuickBooks Online, from Simple Start through Plus. Bills, pay bills, and vendor credits are available in Essentials and Plus only, and purchase orders are available only in QuickBooks Online Plus. You might want to refer to the QuickBooks Online comparison chart at the QuickBooks.com website to see the subscription level necessary to provide your client with the transaction types they require. Some of these transactions can be launched from more than one access point, whereas others can be launched only from one. You'll see demos of the various access points. Whenever we talk about a new area of QuickBooks, we need to review the company settings related to that area. Let's take a look at the purchasing settings. Click on the gear icon and then Company Settings and Expenses. Bills and expenses preferences allow you to use items, track purchases by customer, and mark them billable. Note, whether you can utilize these preferences depends on your level of subscription. Here's also where you turn on using purchase orders. Under the Advanced tab, you have the same types of automation choices that we saw with customers. Do you want QuickBooks to automatically apply bill payments? Think about it before you actually turn that on. Under the Miscellaneous sections, it's a good idea to turn on duplicate check and bill warnings. Let's now talk about entering purchase types of transactions. We'll use the Vendor Center, the Expenses tab, and Quick Create. It's also important to know how to utilize the Banking Center because that is another way to enter transactions in QuickBooks. Let's get started in the Vendor Center. We reviewed the setup of the Vendor Center in an earlier topic, but we didn't enter any transactions. Let's create a bill for Bob's Burger Joint. Because of the preference I set, I have a choice to post directly to an account on the chart of accounts, or to enter item details using items off the products and services list, or a combination. This bill is for advertising. The amount is $2,500. It was for a customer that I want to mark it billable, and I'm going to use my spacebar to mark it billable, and then enter the customer, Amy's Bird Sanctuary. I can use my keyboard shortcut, Control, Alt, and my S key to save the transaction. I'm going to enter one more bill for Bob's for additional advertising and save it. And hit my escape key to get off this screen. It's easy to make payment to Bob's right here from the Vendor Center. If I click on Make Payment from the Actions column, the two outstanding bills show up and are checkmarked to pay. At the top of the screen, I can say how I am paying this bill, by credit card or out of my bank account. And I'll use my keyboard shortcut, Control, Alt, and S, to save it. As with the Customer Center, I can drill down on the vendor name and get a listing of transactions that I can take action on, or create new transactions from the drop-down list on the right. Let's move to the Expenses tab of the navigation bar. This screen shows you a listing of the last 365 days of transactions. Wow, that's a lot. We see the bill and the bill payment we just entered from the vendor center. Let's create an expense from here. This is a nifty screen that I like to use with my shoebox clients. They bring in a whole box full of expense receipts that are marked as to whether they used a credit card, check, or cash. Rather than having to sort through them and putting them into piles by payment type, I can just enter on the expense screen. Let's try it. Books by Bessie was paid by my MasterCard. That makes it post to the credit card payable account. It was for dues and subscriptions for $10. Click on Save and New. My next receipt shows I paid Computers by Jenny with manual check number 32. It was for commissions and fees. For $100. Save and close. These two expenses show up, but one affected the bank account and the other a credit card account. Now, if I were entering all checks, I'd just use the check feature rather than the expense transaction. When we were in the vendor center and also on the expense transactions page, we could easily pay one vendor at a time. But what if you want to pay multiple bills at one time? Use the Quick Create to open the Pay Bill screen. You can choose the payment account, the bills to be paid, and the payment date. Then you just choose whether you want to pay the bills or pay in print. If I say to pay in print, I can get a listing of bills paid, as well as actually print the checks. Now let's use Quick Create to write a check. I'm going to write the check to Diego's Road Warrior Body Shop. Wow, I put the name in, and a drawer popped open saying that I had a bill to pay. Normally, I would pay it on the Pay Bill screen, but I can add the bill to the check, basically making it a bill payment check. That is really cool. I won't make the mistake of using a write check screen and posting to an expense account rather than reducing accounts payable. And then I would save. If this check really wasn't to pay the outstanding bill, I simply enter the account or item details. Although I can print the check here, what if I want to record a lot of checks and print them later? Look in Quick Create under the Vendors column. you see an action to print checks. That's where you print in batch. Remember, you can access the registers under the Transactions tab of the navigation bar. Now, the Banking Center. Let's go back to the Transactions tab and click on Banking. This opens the Banking Center. It's a great feature that allows you to link your bank and credit card accounts to QuickBooks. Once that is done, QuickBooks automatically downloads transactions nightly, though you can download manually by clicking on Update in the upper right-hand corner. It's pretty simple to use. This screen can be sorted by any column. As we scroll down, notice that in the Add or Match column, that QuickBooks has already matched several transactions. Let's sort by that column. The match could be against a check, bill payment, deposits, payments received from customers, etc. If upon a quick review you agree, you can match each one individually, or if you want to match several at one time, click on the first transaction you want to match, hold down your Shift key, and click on the last transaction you want to match. Click on the down arrow on Batch Actions and Accept Selected. That matches the downloaded transaction against a transaction that was already entered into QuickBooks. Now let's sort by description. QuickBooks tries to pick up the memo field from the bank. Hopefully, it's the vendor or a customer name. I have two expenses to a rental. QuickBooks does not where to post or which vendor to use. On the first transaction, I'm going to choose a rental. If it hasn't been added yet, I can just add it on the fly. This is a vendor. Post to equipment rental. And then I can click on Add, and that adds the transaction to QuickBooks. As soon as I added the vendor and the account, QuickBooks assumes I want the next transaction with the same description to use the same vendor and account. That makes it really easy to enter subsequent transactions. Let's look at what else we can do here on this screen. When I click on a transaction, I can easily split the transaction between different accounts by clicking on the split icon. What happens if you think there should be a match? When you click on the transaction, change the radio button to Find Match, and QuickBooks will try and find matching transactions. If you can't find it, it might be because the transaction was already reconciled in QuickBooks. If that's the case, and you don't want to enter the transaction because it's already in QuickBooks, check the box under the Batch Actions and say Exclude Selected. Finally, there's a radio button to indicate that this transaction is a transfer between two company accounts. Oh, there's one more thing I want to show you. If you click on the gear icon, you have some settings that might be helpful. My favorite one is at the bottom, Copy Description. This copies the bank description into the memo field of the transaction. This can be particularly helpful when troubleshooting. I definitely recommend that you select that setting. Our last topic, additional transactions, is next. This topic is going to cover other transaction types that we haven't covered yet. We'll talk about time tracking, making deposits, recording transfers between two company accounts, and recording journal entries. These transactions can all be entered from the Quick Create menu. Let's jump right back into QuickBooks and start with time tracking. In the Employees column of Quick Create, you can easily enter time for your employees or vendors, even if you're not signed up for payroll. You can enter either using the single time activity or the weekly timesheet. Let's look at the weekly timesheet. Choose an employee or a vendor name. Time can be assigned to a customer. Then choose a service item. You can either change or enter a billing rate. That is, how much do you want to charge your customer? And then start entering the hours worked. You can enter hours either using minutes or decimals. Upon saving, the time is available to be invoiced to the customer and will show up on various time reports. Let's learn how to make a bank deposit. Earlier, when discussing the sales transactions, we created an invoice and then received payment, but we never went down to the bank. That's what we'll do here. Click on Quick Create. Under the other column, click on Bank Deposit. Choose the appropriate bank account. Enter the deposit date. If any payments received are in undeposited funds, they will be listed here. Select the appropriate payments. If there are any additional monies or checks to be added, typically non-customer related, enter them under Add New Deposits. Also, on the bottom of the deposit screen, you can indicate if any cash was taken from the deposit. Then save the transaction. Should you use the deposit screen if you're moving money from one company account to another? Although you could, that's not the best way to enter those transactions. Let's talk about transfers. Find Transfer on the Quick Create page. Typically, you're transferring from one of your bank accounts to another bank account, or perhaps transferring money to pay a credit card account. Remember, these are all your company accounts. You do not use the transfer feature to transfer from your bank account to your vendor's bank account. To fill out the transfer screen, select which account you are transferring funds from, and which account you are transferring funds to. Enter the amount and the date. You can add a memo if you want, and then save the transaction. Last but not least are journal entries. Journal entries are also found on the Quick Create screen. If you are signed in as the accountant user, you can also enter them from your accountant toolbox. There's nothing special about entering journal entries. Debits must equal credits. If you are the accountant user, you will be able to mark a journal entry as an adjusting entry, which will show up on the special accountant's report, the adjusted trial balance. If you are posting to a receivables or a payables account, you need to assign a name. Here I have my journal entry. I have a client that is also a vendor with a little bit different name on there, and we want to trade balances. So here's my entry to do that. But wait, you stopped me. Can you have an accounts payable account and an accounts receivable account in the same journal entry? The answer is yes. In QuickBooks Online, you can have as many AP and AR lines on a single journal entry. You applaud. That's why I saved this topic for last. Let's review our learning objectives. We identified the common workflows in QuickBooks. We learned about the accountant toolbar. We used the Customer Center, Sales Transaction page, and Quick Create to initiate common sales-related transactions. Additionally, we used the Vendor Center, Expense Transactions page, and Quick Create to initiate common purchasing type transactions. We also reviewed the company settings related to sales and purchase transactions. Lastly, we went through additional transactions initiated using the Quick Create menu.